Who is Ibrahim Traore? Most people don't know, and those who think they do, don't know enough. He didn't rise like a politician. He didn't speak like a general. He didn't follow the rules of power. He rewrote them. In a world addicted to flashy speeches and rehearsed smiles, he walked in silence. In a continent where leaders clung to thrones, he refused to sit down. Some say he's a ghost, others call him a myth. But what if he's something even more dangerous? A symbol you can't assassinate. No one saw him coming. And yet today, he stands at the edge of empires, staring them down, alone. This isn't just a story about a man. It's a warning, a prophecy, a fire lit in the shadows. Because when systems fail and truth becomes a prisoner, one silent man becomes a revolution. So don't expect a documentary. Don't wait for bullet points or footnotes. This is not about who Ibrahim Traore was. This is about what he became when a nation gave up on fear and chose fire instead. Now, let's begin. Before the flags changed, before the world blinked, before the newsrooms scrambled to pronounce his name, Burkina Faso was burning, and nobody seemed to care. Terror groups had turned rural villages into hunting grounds. Foreign forces claimed they were helping, but for every bullet fired, it was the people who paid. Corruption infected every corner of government, and the silence, it was deafening. Then came the rumors. One day, without warning, anonymous letters started arriving in the hands of high-ranking officials. They weren't threats, they were warnings, typed with no signature, no official seal, just one line that repeated like a heartbeat. When the land cries and no one listens, the soil chooses its own voice. At first, they were dismissed. A poetic prank, nothing more. But in underground barracks, whispers began. Whispers about a captain, young, disciplined, loyal to no political party, but always listening, always watching. Ibrahim Traore. His name wasn't loud, but it moved like a shadow. He didn't ask for promotion, didn't shake hands with ministers, didn't speak much at all. But in every briefing room, his silence felt louder than any general's orders. And then it happened. September 30th, 2022. A convoy of armoured vehicles rolled into the capital. No sirens, no speeches, just dust, determination, and destiny. By the time the president realised what was happening, it was already over. No tanks were fired, no blood spilled, no buildings bombed. Power simply changed hands, like passing a torch in the middle of the night and standing at the centre of it. All? A man the world knew nothing about. He wasn't wearing medals, he wasn't reading from a script. He stepped forward, adjusted his uniform, and said only this: "We didn't come to rule. We came to return what was stolen." The people didn't cheer. Not at first. They were stunned. Who was this man who spoke in riddles? Who refused interviews? Who smiled like he'd already seen the ending? Traore didn't set up a throne. He set up a table. And he called in his first meeting, not with politicians, but with widows and orphans. It was symbolic. It was strategic. And it was something no leader had done before. In that room, one old woman stood up, trembling, clutching a photo of her son, a soldier who died in a useless ambush. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Will you be different? Or will you bury more sons in this land?" Traore looked her in the eyes and replied, "The ground has had enough blood. It's time we buried fear instead." Outside, the media scrambled. Western analysts didn't know what to make of him. Too young, too unknown, too dangerous. But the streets? They didn't care about resumes. They cared about hope. And hope had just walked into the palace without permission. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit cafe far from the capital, 3 foreign operatives met in private. They represented different governments, but all shared one concern: he's not one of ours. For decades, leaders in the region had been predictable. Play the game, follow the script, take the aid, stay quiet. But Traore, he didn't play games. He flipped the board, and just like that, the coup nobody expected became the storm. Nobody could stop. The international community issued statements, condemnations, demands, sanctions. And Traore? He didn't blink. He simply released a handwritten letter, not to presidents, but to the people of Burkina Faso. The world will not save us. We must save ourselves. The age of puppets is over. The age of purpose begins now. No logos, no flags, just ink on paper, and a message carved into every beating heart. This is our land, and no one else will write its future. That day, something shifted. Not in parliaments, not in boardrooms, but in the soul of a nation. And in the quiet that followed, a question began to echo. What happens when a ghost becomes a leader? Stay tuned. The palace lights were still warm from the previous regime. The rug still smelled of old perfume and older lies. But Captain Ibrahim Traore sat in silence, boots muddy, eyes unmoved. He wasn't there to enjoy the throne. He was there to dismantle it. Word had spread like wildfire. The boy captain just pulled off a bloodless coup. He's refusing international calls. He hasn't made a single deal. In elite chambers from Paris to Washington, concern turned to panic, and so the delegation arrived. 3 men, 1 woman, all dressed sharp, fluent in diplomacy, pressure, and thinly veiled threats. They smiled, shook hands with everyone, except him. Traore didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't offer tea. He motioned them to sit, then waited. The woman finally spoke, voice sweet but edged with ice. Captain Traore, let us be clear. Stability requires cooperation, and cooperation begins with trust. He said nothing, just looked at her like he could see through the fabric of her suit, into every plan sewn inside it. Another man leaned forward. We can help you, financially, politically, militarily. All we ask is alignment. There it was, the deal, the golden leash. He finally leaned back and asked one question. Is alignment the same as obedience? Silence, and then he stood, walked to the window, looked out over the capital, over the cracked roads, the bullet holes in old walls, the smoke still hanging in air. He turned around and said, You want Burkina Faso's signature, but this land already signed a deal with blood, with pain, with betrayal. What you offer, it's not aid, it's anesthesia. The room tensed. The air thickened. He walked toward them, slowly. Tell your presidents this. We will align only with the future, and the future speaks in our language, not yours. That was the end of the meeting. No handshakes, no press conference, just the echo of boots walking away. Back home, the people were watching, not TV, not radio. They were watching each other, because something rare was happening. People were remembering how to stand. School teachers wrote, "Courage is contagious" on their chalkboards. Artists painted murals of him holding not a weapon, but a broken chain. And deep in the villages, where no cameras go, children sang songs about the captain who said no. But refusal has a cost, and it came swiftly. 1 week later, Burkina Faso's banking system froze. Fuel shipments delayed. Drones appeared in the sky, unmanned, but not unnoticed. The message was clear: obey or suffer. And Traore, he responded, with a microphone, not missiles. He stood in the center of Ouagadougou, surrounded by thousands, farmers, mothers, children, and he spoke the sentence that would be replayed 1,000,000 times. Even silence can shoot. Even silence can burn. Even silence, when full of truth, can bring down empires. The crowd didn't scream. They roared, not like fans, like fighters, like a country that just woke up from a coma. The next day, satellite images captured something shocking. Foreign military contractors quietly began packing up. Why? Because they weren't afraid of Traore's army. They were afraid of his people, and people with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous kind. But not everyone was clapping. Inside Burkina Faso's own government, old loyalties twitched. Some ministers, silent since the coup, began whispering in dark corners, plotting. They said things like, "He's too radical, he'll isolate us, he must be guided, or replaced." Traore saw it, he expected it, he even welcomed it because betrayal to him wasn't a surprise. It was a test, and so he acted, not with arrests, not with threats, but with revelation. One morning, without warning, a full document dump was published publicly. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, secret deals. Traore didn't accuse, he exposed. And suddenly, the same ministers who whispered were seen fleeing. Some resigned, some vanished. One even tried to blame hackers. But the people had seen enough. Traore didn't clean the palace. He burned the curtains. Let the light in. Then came the day he made history again. In a move nobody expected, he cut ties with France's military presence in the country. Soldiers were given 30 days to leave. The world screamed, media panicked, experts warned of chaos. And yet, nothing exploded, no riots, no civil war, just a country finally breathing on its own. When asked why he did it, Traore said, "If a man must hold your hand for you to walk, then it's not walking, it's control. Let us stumble if we must, but let us stumble alone." But not all foreign powers retreated. Some changed tactics. They approached with new faces, smiling, nodding, offering partnerships. One diplomat even offered to build a new presidential mansion fit for a modern African state. Traore rejected it and built a school instead. When journalists asked why, he said, "I don't need a bigger chair. I need bigger minds." The moment that sealed his legend came days later. A convoy of civilians was ambushed by rogue militants. Instead of sending troops, Traore put on a uniform and led the operation himself. Not as a show, not for cameras. He was nearly shot, but the villagers who survived that day said something strange. He wasn't afraid. Not bullets, not dying. He walked through fire like it was fog. One child, no older than 8, described him as the captain who didn't blink. But here's the part history might miss. It wasn't his tactics or speeches or even the coup. It was the way he made people feel. Unseen people felt noticed. Forgotten people felt remembered. Broken people felt possible. He didn't say, "Follow me." He said, "Remember who you are." And that's far more dangerous than any army, because once people remember their power, no empire can make them forget. The world had leaders. Burkina Faso now had something different. A mirror. Ibrahim Traore didn't lead from above. He led from beside, walking with the people, not in front of them. He didn't shout orders. He whispered truths. They called him the People's General, not because of his title, but because of how he made the poor feel rich in dignity. No parades, no golden podiums, no red carpets, just a pair of dusty boots and a message. You are not weak, you are just waking up. But waking up is dangerous in a world that profits from sleep. The international community called him reckless. Analysts called him a temporary spark. But back home, they called him hope. He refused foreign food aid, not out of pride, but purpose. Teach a nation to grow again, he said, and they'll never beg again. That month, he visited 13 farms, planting seeds with his own hands. No cameras, no journalists, just calloused palms and cracked earth. One farmer cried as he told his son, "That's not a president, that's a brother." Soon, other African youth saw him, not as a Burkina leader, but a continental signal. Sudan, Congo, Niger. Posters of Traore began appearing with quotes like, "Power doesn't come from thrones, it comes from standing upright." Music. Artists remixed his speeches. Poets wrote verses called Traore's Flame, and students carried his face into classrooms like it was a syllabus. But with influence comes fear, and the powerful began circling. This time, not with threats, but temptation. A luxurious jet offered for quick travel. A Swiss account opened in his name, by mistake. An offshore villa donated in a secret letter. He returned the jet, closed the account, burned the letter. When asked why, he replied, "I am not allergic to wealth. I am allergic to forgetting." Back at home, a quiet war began. Not with guns, but ghosts. The ghosts of colonizers, of corrupted systems, of men in suits who smiled while bleeding his country dry. And so, he waged a new kind of battle. One night, he gathered 200 street boys, the ones usually ignored or beaten, and brought them into the old Parliament building. They sat on velvet chairs meant for millionaires. Traore walked in and said, "You've lived under rules written by people who've never lived your life. Tonight, I want you to rewrite the rules." And they did. Page after page, boys who never held a pen wrote laws about dignity, jobs, respect. One boy stood and said, "Why are we the ones treated like criminals when we're the ones who've been robbed the most?" Traore clapped the loudest. Meanwhile, whispers spread in old embassies. He's radicalizing youth. He's dismantling diplomacy. He's dangerous. They were half right. He wasn't just leading a country, he was editing the story of Africa. Where, once the chapter read, "We asked and they gave," he now wrote, "We took back what was always ours." Then came the incident. A convoy of international officials demanded urgent protection for their visit. Instead of sending military escorts, Traore did something unheard of. He walked, alone to the airport, and welcomed them himself, wearing no armor, no entourage, just the flag of his country on his shoulders. The lead delegate, visibly annoyed, asked, "Is this your idea of security?" Traore looked around at farmers, students, vendors, all gathered peacefully, and said, "You're standing in the safest place on earth, the heart of a people who have finally remembered they matter." Still, the threats grew louder. Anonymous, messages, warnings, economic sabotage, even whispers of assassination plots. Traore responded the only way he knew. By walking more openly, he increased his public visits, took no private cars, ate street food under the sun, just like everyone else. One elder asked, "Aren't you scared?" He smiled and said, "You can't shoot a dream that's already been born in thousands." And now, here's the moment history will struggle to believe. He started dissolving power itself. That's right. While most leaders cling to it, Traore began giving it away. He created local councils where farmers, teachers, mothers, and even teenage girls could vote on development plans. He said, "A true leader makes himself smaller so others can grow." In one village, a 19-year-old woman named Aminata chaired a council and passed a sanitation law that cut disease by 60% in 3 months. When she thanked Traore, he replied, "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for remembering your worth." But, let's be honest, not everything was smooth. Roads were still broken, hospitals still lacked supplies, and not everyone believed in the dream. Some accused him of being a populist, others feared he'd lose control, and maybe, just maybe, he would. But Traore wasn't chasing perfection, he was chasing awakening, and he said it plainly. "Even if I fall, the idea will rise. Because this isn't about me, it's about all of us, remembering we are not small." At night, his aides said he barely slept. Not because he feared a bullet, but because he feared failure of memory, that the people might forget what they felt in this moment. So he made a promise. Every child born from this day forward must grow up in a country that never again forgets its spine. And now, as the drums of the next challenge echo louder, Economic sabotage, foreign pressure, internal corruption, the people remain alert, not for him, but for themselves. Because once they had a soldier, now they had a signal. And Ibrahim. Traore? He remained the same, not a king, not a savior, just a man, with dust on his boots and a revolution in his eyes. The wind changed. You could smell it in the air. Not fear, not hope. Something else. Tension wrapped in silence. The world was watching now, not in curiosity, but in calculation. Because when one man defies the formula, he either becomes a legend or a lesson. And the ones in power, they were hoping for the latter. It began subtly. A foreign aid shipment, accidentally rerouted. A currency deal, postponed indefinitely. A sudden drop in wheat supplies from overseas. To the public, it looked like bad luck. But Traore knew better. They cannot kill me without dirtying their own hands, so they will starve me slowly, and blame the hunger on my dream. And so began the reckoning, not a war of bullets, but of pressure. The media flipped, once quiet, now loud. Headlines screamed, "Is Traore becoming a dictator?" Burkina Faso sliding into chaos. Under youthful rule, from people's hero to people's problem. But inside his country, the reality was different. Mothers were starting small farms. Kids were building solar panels from scrap. Communities were cleaning their own streets, brick by brick. Was it messy? Yes. Was it perfect? No. But it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Still, pressure mounted. Opposition groups, once silent, found new microphones. Anonymous donors fueled chaos. Protests emerged, some real, some rented. Then one day, a former ally publicly defected. Traore didn't retaliate. He simply said, "The day I must force you to believe is the day I've already lost." That night, he addressed the nation with no teleprompter. Eyes tired, voice steady. "You were not promised comfort. You were promised courage. I have not come to make your life easy. I have come to help you make it yours." Then came the darkest night. Reports of an imminent military mutiny leaked. Traore's advisors begged him to relocate. Fighters offered to surround his home. He refused them all. Instead, he walked alone to the main city square at dawn. Unarmed, unprotected, and waited. Word spread like wildfire. By noon, thousands gathered around him, not to fight, but to shield. One elderly woman threw her body in front of him and shouted, "You will take him only if you take all of us." That moment shattered the plan. No mutiny, no betrayal, only tears. Traore wept in silence. "You don't need me anymore," he whispered. "You've remembered who you are." But the story didn't end there, because real change never ends. It either evolves or evaporates. Traore knew his time was temporary. He never called himself a ruler, only a rebooter, restarting a system that forgot how to feel. So, he did something unthinkable. He announced that he would step down in 3 years. Not to escape. Not in defeat, but in faith. "My purpose was never to reign," he said. "It was to return the reins." Yet in those final years, his focus sharpened. He built community councils into permanent local powers, rewrote the constitution to limit presidential terms, made education mandatory, not for tests, but for truth. And in a quiet corner of the country, he built something radical, the Academy of Sovereign Thought. No uniforms, no flags, just open minds, young people taught to question, build, protect, and dream. Their motto: power must always ask permission. The world tried one last time. A major deal, backed by wealthy nations, was offered. Billions in infrastructure, but at the cost of mineral rights for 50 years. Traore laughed. "You want to buy a soul with silver? Sorry, this soul is already owned by the people. He walked away, and that decision, it became the spark for other nations to rise. Senegal, Chad, Guinea, youth-led movements began chanting, "Own your earth." The legend of Traore grew, not because of what he held, but what he refused to hold. He never owned a mansion, never traveled first class, never gave his mother a government pension. He simply said, "If I can't live as one of you, I have no right to speak for you." And when the final day came, he didn't host a parade, he hosted a circle. In the middle of the capital, surrounded by farmers, masons, artists, soldiers, and street kids, he sat down, placed his boots on the ground, and passed a wooden staff to a young woman leader. "The world will forget my name," he said, "but I pray it never forgets this feeling. Ma." And that was it. No funeral of luxury, no statues, no palace legacy, only footsteps left in the dust for others to follow. Because Ibrahim Traore never wanted to be remembered for who he was. He wanted to be remembered for what we became, the man who walked without fear. So now you've heard the story, not of a perfect man, not of a savior, but of a soul who stood still while the world shook and whispered, "Not this time." Ibrahim Traore didn't ask to be remembered. He asked us to remember ourselves, our strength, our dignity, our right to write our own script. He didn't change the world with missiles or money. He changed it with the most dangerous weapon of all, an unbreakable idea. That maybe, just maybe, the people can rule without being ruled. And while his name might fade from newspapers, while statues may never be built in his honor, one truth will always echo. The day you remember your worth is the day no one can take it again. So wherever you are, if you're tired, forgotten, or told you're small, remember him. Not because he was extraordinary, but because he proved that you are. This was not just a story. This was a signal. And now, it's your move.